everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Michele Eich, and this is my book, How to Kill an Addiction, Recovery with God. In this book, I have lessons on how to recover God's way, as well as 20 powerful testimonies of real people who have overcome life-controlling issues with God's help, so I would love it if you'd check it out. Every week, I interview somebody who has overcome a life-controlling issue, and this week, I have two very special guests. I have Jeff and Sherry. Jeff and Sherry are married to each other, and we're going to find out how they got together, but welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely wonderful to have you, and I can't wait to dive into your story. But first, can you introduce yourself to our audience and just tell a little bit about yourselves?
I'm Jeffrey Serrano. Been in recovery for quite some time now. Just celebrated 19 years sobriety on this past April.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
This is
I'm Sherry, his wife. We have 5 children, 27 to 4, so
And a couple grandkids, too.
and a couple of grandkids too, and
That's
one on the
good.
way.
and a new one on the way.
That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Well, you're not bored. You're very busy, but it's a blessed kind of busy.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Jeffrey, when we get into your story, you're going to share how you were incarcerated, and that's how you met Sherry. And Sherry, you were actually a prison guard when you met Jeff. So
Correct, yes.
I can't wait to get to that part of the story, but first we got to get some background information because they didn't meet on Match.com, guys. So it was a God thing, and we're going to hear about that today. So Jeff, if you could just start off with talking a little bit about your early years, your family dynamic, because I find that a lot of my guests have things that happen in their early years, and they start believing lies, and sometimes there's trauma and things like that, and it affects their lives later on down the road. So if you could share with our audience just what was your family dynamic like, and did you start believing lies about yourself at an early age?
I'm trying to explain this. I think if you'd asked me this question, I just turned 47 yesterday. If you'd asked me this question 30 years ago, I would have said my family was completely normal. I mean, I grew up in Southern California in a heavily gang activity in our area, and my family was no different than what was around us.
Okay.
So growing up, we had a lifestyle that was familiar to me. It was something that I was used to. It was something that was normal to me. But being in recovery now for quite some time, I can look back on it and I can say that I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. There was no Christian morals. We weren't raised in the church. I mean, in fact, and as you said, we'll talk about this later, I was introduced to God while I was incarcerated. So I mean, like, we had no structure as far as the church home is concerned.
Okay. You know, one of the things that I say to myself and I say to other people is we can't give away what we don't have, right? So if your family didn't know God, how are they going to teach you about God?
Yeah.
You know, and so those things happen, and understanding that helps us to let it go and to forgive, right? And as you said, the other families were like that, so it's like, well, this is normal life, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're watching TV and watching the Brady Bunch and all that, which, you know, we know that that's not real, but we just think that our chaos or our dysfunction is normal because everybody else is living that way too.
Absolutely right.
Okay. So as you grew up, you know, you mentioned that it was kind of like a lot of gang activity and things like that. Were you involved in gangs?
Yes.
Okay.
Growing up, I mean, I was around it. All my family was, heavily involved in it. And around junior high, I started to do really well in sports. So that was my escape. You know, that's where I had a vision or a hope that life was going to be different for me.
Sure.
But sometimes things don't work out the way that we planned, and
Sure.
it was easy for me to go back to what was familiar. It was easy for me to accept my norm, the norm that I grew up with.
Sure. Do you feel like the gang kind of is like a second family, or a place where you're loved and accepted, and where you can earn the respect of other people by doing X, Y, Z and things like that?
Yeah, and I tell you, I don't think I'm any different than a lot of the people involved in gangs now. It was another family for me. It was a place where I was accepted. I grew up. My father was he was an abusive alcoholic. You know, and I learned at an early age that he wasn't my biological father, so I was essentially his stepson, and didn't know that. I mean, he's raised me since I was like 2 years old, so
Right.
I think I always felt that anger, I guess, maybe from him. Maybe I had a hard time feeling his love, I guess.
Right.
And I didn't like being at home sometimes because he was just, you know, an awful alcoholic.
Yeah.
So yeah, the gang life for me was a second family. It was a place that I can feel welcomed.
Sure. So in that lifestyle, Jeff, a lot of times it leads to certain choices, certain illegal activities and whatnot, and you can share as much as you want to, but how did that lifestyle kind of take you into a dark place?
Well, it's kind of weird because I grew up in that lifestyle, and like I was saying earlier, you know, the sports, that also kept me away from a lot of stuff. But I was familiar with it, I was involved in it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I had like the second life when it came to like the sports, basketball in particular. So once we'll just call them hoop dreams. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once my hoop dreams were shattered, and it was something I gave up, it was easy for me to go back to what I was familiar with, and the gang activity, the drug dealing, the drug using, the partying, the drinking. That lifestyle was something that I can come in and out of at no time and not miss a beat.
Okay.
That was my comfort. That was my crutch.
Well, it sounds like, just from the things that you mentioned about your family dynamic, that you were kind of looking for a place where you were accepted, where you were loved, where you were affirmed, like, good job, Jeff, you know, and we need that. We need that from people, and if we don't get it from our family, we'll get it from somewhere else.
You know,
And that can definitely lead us down
Yeah,
a negative path, for sure.
share them about your daughter.
Yeah, so, I mean, I started getting scholarship offers for basketball when I was in my freshman year.
Wow.
And I mean, my sophomore year and my junior year, I did really well. And, you know, with that success came popularity. And, you know, I didn't really have a really good father figure in my life. I didn't really have a parent. I'm not putting this on them. I can take ownership of my choices,
Right.
even at an early age like that now. But, you know, I didn't have that structure. I didn't have that someone telling me, hey, you can't do this. You've got to watch out for this.
Yeah.
Long story short, I got a girl pregnant by end of my junior year, and started my senior year. I almost dropped out of high school. I had scholarship offers, Division I.
Wow.
Scholarship offers to play basketball. And by no means was I like this super phenomenal basketball player going to be in the NBA or something, but I could have used those talents to get into college and do something myself, and that was my hopes. And so once I found out my girlfriend was pregnant at the time, my hopes, my dreams changed from you know, getting out of that life that I was in and being successful to being a successful parent, because I didn't see that growing up. I didn't even see that in other families growing up, because there just wasn't too much of that in my area.
Right.
But I did know what I wanted for my daughter. I did know what life I wanted as a family man, and it was completely different from the one I grew up in.
Wow, that's amazing, because I don't know a lot of 17-year-olds who would make that choice, you know, that you basically let some dreams go for her, which is beautiful. But as we mentioned earlier, a lot of times we want a better life for ourselves and for our kids, but without God and His wisdom, and He's just a good father. Like, He helps us to grow up, He helps us to make good choices. Like, when we don't have God, we just wish things would be better, and we try in our own power, but we aren't able to do that because we don't have Him. We don't have Him and His love and His power working through us.
Yeah.
So
That's so true. And when you're in a dark place, when you're in a dark hole, sometimes you just feel like you belong there. Like, without knowing that God has a better life for you, without knowing that, you just feel like you're born into this life, and you're stuck there. There's nothing good about what's going to happen in your life, because no matter what, no matter how hard you climb, no matter how far you can jump, you're always going to end up back in that life.
Yeah. That is a very dark place to live. Like, when you feel hopeless, that you want things to be better, you wish things would be better, and they just aren't, and you feel like that you're just absolutely stuck in this, really it's like stuck in a pit, you know, and you can't get out. But we know that God is good at pulling people out of pits, and I could preach on that. But you're not there yet. You don't know that yet. And how ironic that you learned that when you were in prison. But you know what? Prison is a great place for God to get your attention.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
Amen?
Yeah.
And, you know, not all prisons have walls. There are people who are in prison in their home or at their job, or, you know what I mean? And we see that a lot today, just with everything going on, and they have that sense of just hopelessness, like, this is as good as it gets, and if it's not going to get any better, can I endure? Like, if you have hope that things could get better, you can keep going. But if you know, and that's one of the reasons that I do the show, is to give people hope, that even in seemingly impossible situations, God's love can still come in.
That's so true.
So true. So I'm just excited that we're able to share this today. So you have a daughter, and you're trying to be better for her. Are you doing, is the gang thing still going on from there, or no? Okay.
No. I actually moved in with her my senior year, and they lived in a different city than where I was living. So immediately, you know, my dreams were on the right path. I was out of the neighborhood I grew up in, and I was going to school full time, and I would work at night, and I mean, I was gonna be this. It was a perfect life, you know. We were gonna eventually plan to get married. I was gonna we're gonna raise my daughter. You know, it was gonna be perfect. Little white fence, you know, all the little perfect stuff.
Yep. Yes. And then I'm assuming that didn't happen. I mean, how did things kind of go sideways in that situation?
And so she didn't have the same hopes and visions I had, I guess. And long story short, she ended the relationship, and that was the first time in my life where I allowed disappointment. I accepted it, you know, as we talked about earlier, just being a part of the life I was destined to be in. You know, it was that pit. And I went back to the things that comforted me before that, which was the lifestyle, the drinking, the drugs. That was my comfort.
Yeah. And when we experience painful situations, we don't know how to deal with it or cope with it. And again, when we know God, we can give Him those things, and He can comfort us and heal us. But if we don't know Him, then we're just going to go back to the same things that got us kind of in a dark place in the first place. So it's like a cycle, right? It's like a cycle that just like things get a little bit better and then things don't, and then we go back to the same stuff and we work harder and we just, the thing with cycles is you're never moving forward, you're just kind of spinning. And it can really be exhausting. So at what point do you actually, I mean, what are the things that led you to go into prison? And you can share as much about this as you want to, Jeff.
Okay. You know, you can look back on your life once I got to a point where God came into the picture. I can look back on my life and really see where he was at work the entire time.
Yes.
So, like I said, my daughter was born March of 1993, and I graduated high school that June. By the grace of God, I graduated high school. And my parents moved to Indiana right after my graduation. And right away I felt like, you know, I wasn't important enough for them to stick around. They were coming out there and I was staying in California. Well, later on down the road, I find myself coming to Indiana to escape the lifestyle I was in out there. Only to find that lifestyle was in Indiana too. It was, you know, all I had to do was find it.
Right.
So I moved to Indiana to escape the drug scene out in California, and it ended up bringing the drug scene to Indiana with me.
Okay.
And that's where my path to incarceration began.
Okay.
I started, did you want me to share like a little bit about that?
If you feel comfortable.
Yeah,
But before you do, I just wanted to say that I have had so many people say, I moved to get away from the problem. You know, and we can all laugh about it now because we know that if we want to find the real problem, we just need to find the nearest mirror.
Right.
And we'll find the problem, and that goes for yours truly here, right? But we think, oh, you know, I'm packing my bags, I'm leaving my problems behind, but we have the problems within us, and, you know, the same thing happens again. So
Sure
I
does.
just,
The names and faces just change.
yeah, the address changes, but
Yeah.
yeah, you've taken them with you. So what is the, you know, the idea about the baggage,
Yeah.
right? The baggage that we take with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, pack a lot of baggage. Anyway, so I know how that is for myself as well. But yeah, go ahead and, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, that would be great.
Yeah. So, I know now that it wasn't just the drugs that led me to the prison. It was the lifestyle that came with it. I mean, it wasn't just my addiction to drugs. My drug of choice ended up being methamphetamine.
Okay.
It was that drug that gave me confidence. It gave me stuff that I didn't have growing up. But it was the lifestyle that came with it, the attention, the popularity, the same stuff that I was craving growing up that I got when I was playing basketball. I started getting in selling drugs, and being in a small town in Indiana and coming from California, like, you know, I was like the coolest thing since sliced bread there. And that would be eventually my downfall.
Wow.
I was transporting it from California to Indiana and got pulled over on the way back by a federal agent, a U.S. Marshal, and ended up getting sentenced to 18 years in federal prison.
You know, the enemy is very sneaky and very cunning, you know, because it all seems so great on the outside. And it is for a while. I mean, the Bible says that sin is fun for a season. If it wasn't fun initially, we probably wouldn't do it, right? You know? And I know when, you know, the wheels came off of my 18-wheeler, there were 18 wheels that came off, okay? I love her. She laughs. I feel so funny around her. But, you know, it's true. I mean, we can laugh about it now, but, like, in the moment, it's horrible. You know, and like you said, I mean, it gave you that feeling of confidence and everything you were looking for, but the enemy has a false solution for every real solution that God has, right? And we get caught in the snare. We get trapped in that situation. So it sounds like that's kind of what happened to you, and then, you know, the consequences come, and when the consequences hit, it's incredibly terrifying and painful, and it's scary. It's scary. So you spent how long? You were sentenced to 18 years, and you spent how long in?
13.
13. Okay. So Sherry, this is where you come into the picture, that you were working at the prison where Jeff was staying, and we know that we're just gonna say that God works all things together for good.
Works in
Romans
mysterious
8:28
ways.
works in mysterious ways. That's it.
Yeah.
That's good. So, talk a little bit about just your first encounter with Jeff, and how were you doing at the time?
So, I was a mess when I first met him. My life outside of work was a mess. I was going through a divorce, and my children were essentially taken away from me due to the divorce situation, and trying to run away from one area to another where it just followed me.
Yeah.
So, because I don't struggle with substances, but I mean, I struggle with anger and bitterness and entitlement and pride. So, so I took the position at the federal prison where Jeff was housed at. But I had only been, so I started off as a correctional officer, and then I transferred positions to the religious services department.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And so with that, I was able to actually begin to attend Celebrate Recovery at the church that I was going to, because I was just alone and in my own dark pit. So I started attending Celebrate Recovery, and that was in 2012. And so I did a step study and was nearing the completion of that, which was about a year long. And I was like, I know where this would work at. Because I had actually, that's where Jesus met me. That's where I started to get hope at, because, I actually finally found my people that loved me and that just cared for me, and they truly just wanted the best for me, and they showed me God's love. So I finished the step study, and the ministry leader at the time at the church that I was going to, the CR he was also the state rep for Kentucky, and I was like, Dickie, we need to get this going in the prison. We need to get a CR inside. And he would put me off, and he's like, I'm going to pray about it. And I asked him several times.
Yeah.
And so finally, my pastor was coming to preach. Now, I had met Jeff during one of the sessions that he would come to, just to, I would put him on call out, and he would come just to get out of work,
Okay.
That was a nap time. So what it was
That's funny.
it was I guess it was considered a Bible study, because it was a Bible study. And me and a couple guys at our job there in the institution, we signed up for it to get out of work for an hour once a week. And that's actually our first encounter. There was a couple times I didn't want to go. I just stayed there. And in prison, if you're supposed to be somewhere, that's where you're supposed to be. In case something happens, and they have this list. She has a list, hey, I'm supposed to have this many inmates here at this time. And there's a couple times I just didn't feel like going, so I stayed at work. And so she's like, where's Jeffrey Serrano? She actually did attendance or something.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yes. Yeah. And so my pastor, that was our first encounter. And then, but I mean, it was just kind of in passing, me making sure that he was where he was supposed to be when he was supposed to be there. Because I wasn't getting in trouble for him,
Exactly, yes.
So, so my pastor I talked him into coming on a Friday night to do a service. And I didn't want anybody to not show up because I was like that person. I was mean. I was hateful. I would almost even say that I was abusive towards the inmates there.
Wow.
In the name of, it's just you're doing what you're supposed to do.
Your job, yeah.
Yeah. But my approach was not good. Like it was very mean. But after I had done the step study and my pastor was coming in, I asked Dickie, the state rep, I was like, hey, Brian's coming in to talk. How about you just come with him just to feel it out? Because, the thought of going into a prison does not, like, entertain many people. Yeah. It's kind of like, no thanks. But he agreed, and he brought along another volunteer who would serve with him if he so chose to do the leadership step study. So that's what they did. They come, and I invited Jeff because I didn't want nobody to not come.
Right. Yeah.
So and that's I mean, we can both look back on it now, and her intentions for inviting me were like, hey, I'm trying to fill up this church, so my pastor doesn't come in here and look silly with only a few people there.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, you're gonna be my husband someday, so you need to get in there and find God, because
exactly.
There was definitely no intentions at that point in time.
Right.
I wasn't looking for a husband at that point.
Yeah.
I wasn't even praying for one.
No.
Yeah.
So and I mean, here I am, just same person I was. I'm 10 and a half years into my sentence now.
Oh, okay.
And I had a couple of people from the institution, they're like, hey, Miss Kern's looking for you. Like, for what? I went to class Thursday, whatever.
Yeah.
And she sees me in the hallway, and she says, did you get my message? And I said, yeah, what?
Yeah.
She said, I got a pastor coming in here Friday. I want you to come.
And you're like, let me check my schedule.
At this point, I never went to church.
Yeah.
I've never stepped foot in a church.
Wow.
And the person I was at that time, I was full of self, I was full of image, and I was still, I felt like I was a respectable person in there. And that's not the type of person that goes to church. That's not the type of person that's gonna be seen in a church, because in prison, there's several different kinds of people, and I was not one of them kinds of people in church. So I had no intention of going, but I did. I did.
All right, so you changed your mind,
You
or?
did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I snuck in the back. It's kind of staying out of the way. I still didn't understand why I was there. I wasn't forced, and here she comes along, and she has Dickie and another gentleman named Scotty and her pastor, and they come up and they introduce themselves, and they just sit and talk with me, and like everybody. It wasn't just me. Like I wasn't the only one there.
So you weren't the only inmate?
No, there was several, maybe a couple hundred, maybe.
The chapel was
It was full, but
Oh,
anyway.
wow. Okay.
So I listened. I stuck around and listened to him preach, and the message couldn't have been more for me than any message I've ever heard. His message that day was on the prodigal son, but it was from the father's perspective.
Wow.
And I think growing up, I never had that. I never felt that important. Like there was nothing I could, even in the my success in sports, everything that I had going on, I never felt my dad's love was unconditional. So I was just intrigued and drawn to this hope.
Yeah. Wow.
That was my first night in church. And that was our first, that struck a friendship with her and I.
Okay.
You want me to go into that?
Of course.
So,
we want the details, come on.
So like Sherry was talking about, her goal was to implement celebrate recovery into the institution.
Which is amazing. Truly amazing.
It truly is. I mean, I'll talk more about that in a minute, but And my goal, I mean, I'm like, hey, this woman, you know, I've been in prison for 10.5 years now, and this woman's being nice to me. Like officers, even though she was now inside the chaplain's office, she was essentially a secretary. I think they gave her the title of religious service assistant, but it's a secretary. You know, and I was enjoying the friendship we had. I was enjoying the interaction I was getting from her.
Yeah.
So my intentions for coming to church and all that stuff at the time were just to have some type of communication with her. But this whole time, God's like, that's what you think, buddy. You know?
I could just see God up there going, this is getting good.
So she's like, hey, I want to bring in this Celebrate Recovery. And I was like, I haven't done drugs for 11 years now almost. I don't need to go to that. She's like, it's not just for drugs and alcohol.
Right.
So again, I think seeking that attention and acceptance from her probably, definitely, I agreed to check it out.
Yeah.
So
Come to the informational meeting.
yeah, so she's like, just come listen. You know, we're gonna have a group of guys in here. This whole time, she's master minding like all these people that she thinks have some sort of influence in the institution.
Okay.
Whether it's, I guess, me with the gangs and just, I was involved in a lot of stuff there. Just different guys from different backgrounds, different ethnics, backgrounds, different everything.
Talents.
And so she's like handpicking all these potential leaders to start doing a step study. So I walk in, and I was like, oh, heck no.
Yeah, let's all talk about our feelings.
Right.
That sounds like fun.
I'm not being seen anywhere on the compound with any of these guys.
Yeah.
So again, I'm like, just like I was that first night at church, and I was ready to just kind of slide out the back door. But and then here comes the two guys. I didn't know who was coming in to lead it. And in comes Dickie and Scotty, the two guys that took their time to introduce themselves and say hi to me that first night at church.
Yeah.
And now that had been a couple months now since my first encounter, that first day I went to church, and the first day that we done the informational thing on the Celebrate Recovery. It's been a couple months, and I wasn't like every Sunday, but I was popping in and out of church more often than I had ever done.
Yeah.
And I had this desire, something was changing in me, slowly, but it was.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome. I love that.
I signed up for our first Celebrate Recovery step study, and from there, our friendship just blossomed. I mean, I think every morning I had to pass the chaplain's office where she worked to go to my job, and sometimes you have to wait for the guards to open the doors to get to your job, and she'd come in. I mean, it was nothing secretively, you know, there's nothing secret about it. I mean, there's hundreds of inmates around you.
Right.
But we would pass each other scripture. It wasn't like, you know, the old like drug deal handshake. It was just, here you go, read this today. I thought you would like this.
Aw,
That type of stuff. So
that's beautiful.
that went on for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
They were able to launch a full-on Celebrate Recovery in the institution, not just the step study, which was completely unheard of. It was the first one across the whole United States that we actually have a large group meeting and small groups. But that's
amazing.
Just like it was out there, you know, just like I was attending.
Yeah, that is, Sherry, I just want to commend you for doing that, because that is just so incredible. And we're not affiliated with Celebrate Recovery, but many of my guests attend, I've attended. And the thing I love about it, it's not just substance abuse.
Yes.
It's any life-controlling issue, any hurt, habit, or hang-up.
Absolutely.
And guess what? We all have them.
Anybody living life needs a CR.
We do. And, you know, we've got to get past that stigma of, well, people are going to think I'm a drug user or whatever. And even providing support for parents and grandparents and things like that. So it's all about relationship with Jesus and developing that. It's not necessarily about I'm going through steps. It's about how to develop and walk in a relationship with God, and how to get rid of the things that are causing all the problems in the first place.
Yes.
Like God does that.
Yes.
You know, he digs into those deep roots and pulls them out, and we can have freedom.
Yes.
We can have joy. We can have
Yes.
peace. We can have know the love of God.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just sitting here thinking about, you know, you doing that, you going through it. I mean, God was leading you to do that.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, no offense to your pastor, but let me pray about it. Let me pray about God, should we bring light into the darkness? I'm just not sure if this is you.
Yeah.
But, you know, I understand there are different protocols and,
Mhm.
you know, sometimes we think we have to keep God out of everything.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe that's part of the reason we're in part of the mess we're in, but we're not gonna get into that right now.
Yes.
But yeah, that's amazing that you did that.
Yes.
That's good for you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was definitely, he was super busy, you know,
Yeah.
so it's a matter of having the time to come in.
Right.
For a couple of hours, you know, it wasn't
Yeah.
just a 1 hour call out, like this was a couple of hours all year long. And then of course, you know, with prison, you also have like unexpected things to come up. So
Right.
there were times that they drove up there and we couldn't get them in because
Yeah.
there was something going on.
Yeah.
But I was definitely led, and he says that I mastermind, and I did handpick, but I prayed over every single one of those people
Amazing.
that I asked to be a part of it. Because I
Yeah.
had guys saying, hey, I heard you were doing this, I want to be a part of it.
Mhm.
And I had to, you know, gently say, well, maybe you can be a part of the next one.
Okay.
Because ideally, what I was trying to do was set up a group of men that were strong leaders, and that's what I was seeing was strong leaders. You know, who is not going to back down when they're challenged
Right.
about Jesus and what Jesus is doing for them.
Yeah.
So we did the step study in order to move forward with the large group, because
Right.
they were going to be the ones to run it.
Yeah.
And essentially, it became a reentry program that we were able to institute. Like, you know, I had support from all three of the pastors and, you know, the associate warden at the time. You know, I had the support of being able to bring in this reentry program, because what I knew about reentry in the training that I had in it was lacking. Like, there was a lot of missing links.
Okay.
So the thing about Celebrate Recovery, when I was bringing it in, I was like, this is something that is nationwide, that when
Right.
you get out, you can make those connections and you're already aware of the
Yes.
program and what it can do. And at least have that support system when you get out, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so huge, Sherry, because we have God and we need God, obviously, but we also need a community.
Yes.
And for you, Jeff, the gang provided a community, that sense of family and that sense of belonging, and yet, you know, that led you into some trouble. And so we need community. That's so
Yes.
important, and I love that. That's awesome. So at what point did you, you know, there could be children watching, guys. What point did you start feeling like it was more than a friendship? You know, you're passing scripture, you considered her a friend, and you know, can you share a little bit about that?
So, and you know, we've told our story to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think everybody is very skeptical about how we met.
Mm.
Like they really don't believe our story is as we tell it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, first of all, I mean, there was nothing inappropriate that happened
Mm-hmm.
in there.
Yeah.
Other than when I left her my Bible
Mm-hmm.
with my dad's address where I was going home to.
Aw.
Outside of that, I mean, there was never no physical, nothing like that. But
He
there
did
were,
as it was like a week out from his release. And he's like, I just want to kiss you. I said, it ain't happening here.
she did. So to answer your question, I'd say it was probably maybe close to 6 months, and about 6 months before I got out. And it's weird the way it worked, because I didn't have an out date as, soon as, when I left, my out date wasn't, supposed to be that date, it was supposed to be a couple years later. And during the time, there was a reform going on,
Okay.
prison reform going on, and a lot of people were waiting what they call the 2-point reduction for it. First time nonviolent drug offenders were gonna get a 2-point sentence reduction.
Okay.
And in the federal system, everything's based upon a point system. The judge he doesn't have discretion to go above or below the guidelines, he has to stay within that guideline.
Okay.
So with getting 2-point reduction, my guidelines were gonna be lowered. And it was a lengthy, there was thousands and thousands of federal inmates waiting for the courts to respond to their motion for the
Okay.
2-point reduction.
Yeah.
So I was in limbo. Didn't know when exactly I was getting out, didn't know any of that, and it was a difficult time. And
Yeah.
so it was about 6 months before we were sitting there in the chaplain's office and just talking, like, and nothing. It was just like, something's going on here. And I mean, she might remember. I remember I was helping her with braiding something for
No, we
the,
were taking the string
taking the string apart for the Native Americans, yeah.
Okay.
And we just started talking about stuff that we never talked about
Yeah.
before. And it didn't feel like we were being sneaky, it didn't feel like we were doing anything wrong. And again, like, nothing inappropriate happened in there.
Yeah.
And I think for the next 6 months, as I was waiting on a release date, and it came, I think she might have came to me that day, and she just looked really sad. And I said, what? She said, you're going home Monday.
Wow.
Because she had access, she could see it,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know.
Wow.
So it was like pretty instant, like,
Awesome.
and abrupt when I left. And she was off that week too.
I took off.
She was like, so this is it.
Aw.
See you later.
Yeah. So, were you sad? Were you sad to be finished?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't know if I was ever gonna see her again.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we both knew that God had put us in each other's lives for
Yeah.
a reason, and I didn't, I was a little scared that reason was just in there, like.
Yeah.
And if that's where it had ended, I was okay with it, because it was through our friendship that I came to know Jesus. It was
Yes.
through our friendship that I had met. I was accepted in a whole different life, in a healthy way now, with a
Yeah.
different group of people.
Yes.
That acceptance I was craving for, starving for growing up.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was with brothers in Christ.
Right.
I didn't even know
Yeah.
what that was, and I found that
Yeah.
there. So without leaving there, without knowing if that was it for us, it was a little heartbreaking.
Wow.
But
So
taking
they
it,
told you that you're getting out of prison 2 years early, and you're like, no, I think I'll just stay.
yeah, and I actually had an opportunity, I think a year before all this was going on, to leave the institution, to go to what they call a camp, where there's a lot more freedom, and it was a little bit closer to my family. I was right in the middle of step study, right in the middle of sober and recovery, and to be honest, I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave Sherry. Like, I didn't want to leave not being around the change that was happening in my life there.
Yeah. Well, and had you gotten released then, Jeff, maybe you weren't ready, and sometimes we think we're ready to step out and do something, and God says, you're not ready.
Yes.
He's a good father. He's not gonna give the car keys to a 5-year-old because he knows that the 5-year-old's gonna crash the car,
Yes.
right? So, my son's watching, we've had this conversation. But it's like we've gotta go through the process with him, and it's not like, oh, you're perfect now, you can go. We're never perfect. Jesus is perfect, but
Yes.
God knows when we're ready, and then, we can be released into the next thing. So at what point then you're out of prison, you took the week off, when did you kind of reconnect?
So, I sent him a care package. So he left me his Bible and
Yeah.
I knew he didn't have one.
Right,
So I sent him a new one.
but you kept his.
And I kept his.
Nice.
We still have
Yeah,
it.
yeah, we
That's
sure do,
beautiful.
yeah, and so within that Bible, like, I put my phone number, my contact information in, cause I knew that I was taking a chance too, I mean, it was
Yeah.
kind of a risk as
Sure.
well, you know, I mean, I was, essentially at this point in time, like, I was not going by the regulations put
Mhm.
forth by the prison, so.
Mhm.
But I sent it to him and I was like, well, you know, if he calls me, he calls me. If
Yeah.
not, you know, then again, like it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
So I was at the zoo with my kids and my niece and nephew with like 0% battery life
Yeah.
left on my phone. And I
Aw.
get this phone call and it says Lebanon, Indiana. And I was like, I don't know anybody from Lebanon. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's him.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I answered the phone.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We talked as long as we could with the battery life that
Yeah.
I had, so.
That is beautiful. Well, I love your story. It's a great love story because the two of you are a great love story, but it's an even better love story because God loves us and you
Absolutely.
both have experienced his love.
Yes.
And when
And
you
he
know,
was the center of
Yeah,
our
absolutely,
relationship starting out, like
Yeah.
definite center, so.
for sure. And when that happens, it just makes everything so much more amazing. But I want to get back to something with you, Jeff, if we could. And, you know, you're going to these classes, you're hearing sermons like the prodigal son. There aren't really any seeds planted. You know, grandma wasn't telling you about Jesus when you were little or anything like that. I mean, this is
yeah.
all brand new for you. Can you kind of share with us when you really, like, in that moment where you knew God was real and you invited Jesus to be part of your life? Is that something that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
So, again, Sherry, they brought in, are you familiar with the Emmaus Walk?
Yeah.
They brought in the Emmaus Walk into the institution, and she asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. And me and a couple of friends were, we signed up, and it was amazing. I mean, we had these volunteers coming in from outside, and there's a group of them, 20, 30, 40
There's a
of
bunch
them.
of them.
Yeah.
And I'm way outside my comfort zone now. You know, like not only am I just sneaking in from the rec yard on Sunday,
Yeah.
I'm actually going to the chapel in the middle of the day at nighttime. It was a 3-day weekend, just like it is out here, and you're going to the cafeteria with these volunteers. You're doing all this stuff, and it's just everybody's seeing you now, and now
Yeah.
I'm just totally putting myself out there.
Right.
And I just remember sitting in there, and at this point, you know, I'm still going to church. I'm still seeing people lifting up their hands and worship, and I'm just sitting there like, phony. I'm just totally judgmental, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was. It just had this overwhelming desire, feeling, and I accepted Christ into my life and got baptized that weekend. And I remember coming about the water and just being embraced by a couple brothers there.
Wow.
And I walked to the back of the room there, and they were, you know, they started doing worship and stuff, and I just started totally surrendering. I can get chills thinking about it now. And it was that moment where I said, God, I'm yours.
Wow.
I'm yours. Yeah, I didn't care about my past. I didn't care about what people thought anymore. I was ready to go on this journey, and it was from that day forward. There was no shame in my game.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. And it sounds like, Jeff, you found what you were looking for the whole time.
The whole time.
The unconditional love of the Father is what our hearts need. That's what we're designed for. We are designed to know God and to be known by Him. And it's such a beautiful relationship.
It is. I mean, my whole life I craved physical things, you know, attention, comfort. Everything was based on physical. I didn't know that the whole time it was that spiritual
Yeah.
And,
I
and,
love
and
it.
tell you, I want to share with you a real quick story too.
Of course.
I mean, we have, God is, the song we sing, there's a song we sing at church I just absolutely love. It's, you know, I've seen you move the mountains and I
Yes.
believe I'll see you move it again.
Yes,
We have had times in our relationship,
yeah,
cause it's not always been ideal for other people to accept
Mhm.
how we met
yeah,
and what we're doing now, you know, as
Mhm.
far as, the sober recovery and church. I mean,
sure,
everything that we got going on in our lives now, it's a little bit
Yeah.
hard for people to really get it.
yeah,
Yeah.
But, so I'm in Indiana, she's in Kentucky.
mhm,
I'm 6 months out now, I request a probation transfer, because I'm on probation for
Right.
a few years to Kentucky. And it took a little bit for it to go through, but it finally got processed. So I transferred my probation from Indiana to Kentucky. And we lie to the probation officer.
Yep.
Obviously, Sherry is a couple months pregnant now
Yep.
and having a hard time finding a new job. She's still working at the institution.
mhm,
Yep.
And there is no law broken by us getting together after I leave there.
yeah,
It's just a moral and ethical code within
Okay.
the institution itself that's frowned upon.
mm,
So we lied to my new probation officer about where she worked.
mhm,
And she was pretty sharp, come to find out. She wasn't buying it. So she approved of it, and we had just moved to Alexandria by her kids, my stepkids. I mean, we're literally across the street from where they're living with their dad. It was perfect.
It was perfect.
That was
Yeah.
perfect. And then one day, out of nowhere, something's not right. I get a call from the probation officer, and while she's at work, we don't have no contact.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, she's inside the institution and on
Right.
the phones. I get a call from my probation officer. She says, "You need to come and see me." I said, "Usually that's just like a drug test, no big deal." And just something felt different.
yeah,
And then Sherry ended up getting removed from the compound that day by investigation unit inside the institution, and they had put her in the front building. She wasn't allowed in there with the inmates no more. And I think, oh. So I walk into my probation officer, and she says, "You lied to me."
mm,
And I says, "How could I possibly, would you understand? If I
Right.
was truthful about what was going on, where Sherry worked, and what our plans together in our life was, would you have understood?"
yeah,
She's like, "Probably not." I said, "And that's why I didn't tell you."
yeah,
I mean, we have no intention, she's not gonna be working at the institution for, forever. As soon as she finds
Right.
another job, she's pregnant, it's kinda hard to leave. Long story short, she said, "Boy, I'm revoking your probation, you gotta go back to Indiana."
oh no, yeah,
So here we are, I'm 2.5 hours away
mhm,
from where she's at and the kids, and we're praying. So I asked my probation officer in Indiana, I told him the situation.
mhm,
He says, "Jeff, I don't know what it is, but I believe you."
mm,
He said, "I'm gonna see if I can get your probation moved to as close as Kentucky as you can get," which is
Yeah.
Lawrenceburg, is where we're at now.
right,
So I had 2 weeks for all this to happen.
mhm,
So, and we're a week into it, I only got a week left, so I haven't heard anything. He says, "I've got permission for you to move to Lawrenceburg, you can move." So now we have to move, find a place in a week. Sherry and I drive from Alexandria, Kentucky to Lawrenceburg, get off on the exit there and get a newspaper, and we're looking for apartments. She has a dog. Nobody
I'm
wants to-
getting rid of my dog.
heck no,
I gotta go back to Indiana with the dog.
yeah.
So, we're sitting
Our
there.
daughter was allergic to our dog, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I hate to get rid of our daughter, but I'm kidding. Sorry, honey,
Maybe.
if you're watching. But yeah, go ahead.
So we're sitting in the parking lot there, calling these numbers that are in the newspaper. And there's just nothing for us.
Yeah,
So we stopped and we did what, the very thing that brought us together was, we sat there in that parking lot and prayed. And we took off in the car, we drove, we turned somewhere, don't even know why, and we ended up by these apartments, and we're like, "Oh, we can't afford these.
Yeah.
let's go in here and find out. We're here for reasons. So
Yeah.
we go in there and we end up applying. And long story short, the lady says, I'll have a place opening up in 3 weeks. And we're like, well, we need to move like now.
Yeah.
We have a week.
Yeah.
I said, well, let me see what I can do. And, you know, once again, God made a way.
Yes.
We, you know, ended up being able to move, and there was just another moment in our life where, you know, we can go back now, we can argue, we can have moments,
Yeah.
and I think when we both just look at it like,
Yeah.
this is bigger than us.
It
Yeah.
is.
God has brought,
Amen.
He has created this relationship for us, He has
Yes.
designed it for us for a purpose,
Mm.
and it's not for us to enjoy each other's company because, you know, we're going 6 years now, there's times you just don't do that. It's, it's because I think together, we are able to reach people
Yeah,
and
We make
show
a good
hope.
team.
you do. You
Yeah.
make an incredible team, and I love your story. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Well, thank you
Just
so
wanted to
much for
share that
sharing
with
that. Yeah, that's
that's one of our
powerful.
favorite stories.
That's great.
Yeah.
And the dog got to stay.
And the dog
Okay,
is
so it's a
staying,
happy ending when the dog.
The dog stayed,
And
yeah.
the
That's
kids.
good. That's good. And the kids. Yeah, and the dog and the kids. Awesome. Well, as we wrap up here, guys, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. So obviously, you're still very involved with Celebrate Recovery. That's kind of
Yes.
what God used. It's a tool that God
Yes.
uses to
Yes.
bring people into a relationship with Him and set them free
Yes.
from whatever hurt, habit, or hang up, or whatever life controlling issues going on.
Yes.
So what are you doing now? You make a great team. You have this foundation. What are you doing now? Just continuing to share your story and bring light into the darkness, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, we've been coming to Whitewater Church here for almost 4 years now. And when we first started coming here, we'd been away from Celebrate Recovery for about a year. We had the baby, we just moved around a little bit.
Right.
And they opened up one here at Whitewater. And it took us a year before we actually were able to make time to come to it.
Yeah.
And we started coming for a few months, got involved right away, and we were given the opportunity to become the ministry leaders for Celebrate Recovery here.
Awesome.
And again, it's a God thing because that's
Yeah.
the very thing that brought us together.
Amen.
You know, it was in that
Yeah.
ministry that our relationship was built. It was in that ministry that our friendship was developed. I mean, I think that's where we fell in love, and here we are.
And we prayed for him.
We did.
We, like 4 or 5 years ago though, we
Before.
prayed to have a CR ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we sure did. We prayed that
Yeah.
we would be able to do this together. And for us, it's a way to not only to give back,
Yeah.
but it's a way to share our story. It's a way
Absolutely.
to just let God's story in our lives show others that like anything's possible. I mean, He brought
Yes.
two opposite ends of
Yes.
the fence.
Yes.
Like on all levels, you know, I
Yeah.
was raised in the country on a farm.
I'm a city boy, Southern
Yeah.
California.
Yeah.
And then here we are, like we're doing this together, and I think what makes us successful is that we are so transparent about it,
Yeah.
but we want everybody to come, just to share God's love, you know,
Right.
to feel it, because
Right.
and essentially go off of our feelings anyways. And, you know, I try to make it a point every week, especially after I was on quarantine and I didn't have that connection, every week to hug every single female that comes into this
Aw,
building.
yeah.
You know, and they look forward to that. They understand that, you know,
Yeah.
that is just God, like, wrapping them in their love. Because, you know, I'm sometimes not a touchy-feely person, but I just know that that's what I needed when
Right.
I started coming,
Yeah.
and it truly provided comfort to me.
Yeah.
So to come in and to have somebody to just be hugged, or to go before the cross and at Jesus's feet and to lay our burdens down, like
Yes.
sometimes those actions and showing them that this is what it's like. And then to watch people grow
Yes.
and how God is moving in their life, just
Yeah.
as we did, like it's really exciting
It
to
is.
see how people are just growing and, accepting God for his love.
And it's our way, I mean, it would be so easy to say, thanks God, we got it from here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's our way of saying, God, we are so grateful
yeah.
and thankful for what you've done in our life.
Mhm.
Yes.
We want you to use us wherever you need us, wherever we can help build your kingdom, wherever we
Yes.
can show
Yeah.
hope to somebody that doesn't have it.
Yes.
Here we are, use us. And
Yeah.
that's a way for us to stay connected, it's a way for us to give back.
Yes.
It's a way for us to say, thank you, God.
And we
Yeah.
definitely get our buckets full
Absolutely.
on those nights, like.
Yeah. And we volunteer with the church.
Mhm.
I mean, we stay active,
Yeah.
not only in just recovery, but
Just
in
serving.
discipling, yes.
Serving in many areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, and your lives individually and together are examples that nothing is impossible for God.
Yes.
You are walking, breathing testimonies of God's love, and I so appreciate you guys. Well, before we close today, is there anything else that you would like to share, either one of you?
I just want to thank you for
Of course.
giving us an opportunity to come and share here.
Yes.
Love what you're doing. Looking
Thank
forward
you.
to reading the book.
Thank you.
And if you guys are, anybody's ever in the area,
Absolutely.
not just Wednesday nights,
Mhm.
but if you're in the Miami area here on Wednesday nights, we have dinner at 6.
Mm-hmm.
We feed you, and then we send you to a meeting from 7 to 9.
Yep, at Whitewater Crossing.
And you're gonna get a hug,
And
and you're going
a
to,
big hug from my wife.
you're gonna get a community of people
Yeah.
who really know God's love
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
shine brightly for Him. So thank you guys
Thank you.
for sharing your
you.
story. And I want to thank our audience for watching this episode of Voices of Recovery. We're creating a safe place where people can go on their journey with God. If you're new here, we'd love it if you'd give us a like or a follow. And if you feel led, please share this message out, because I'm sure there's somebody you know who needs to hear what Jeff and Sherry had to share today. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Voices of Recovery. Bye-bye.